welcome back to the Prepare Like a Pro podcast. This week on the show we have Peter Brukner, a specialist sports and exercise physician with a special interest in nutrition. Peter is a founding partner of Olympic Park Sports Medicine Centre in Melbourne and Professor of Sports Medicine at La Trobe University. A founding executive member of the Australasian College of Sports Physicians, he served 2 terms as president and played a key role in establishing sports medicine as a medical speciality in Australia. Peter is also the co-author of widely used textbook Clinical Sports Medicine and has been a team physician for professional football clubs as well as national athletes in swimming, soccer, men's hockey, and including Olympic and Commonwealth Games. Peter was the Socceroos team doctor at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, head of sports medicine and sports science at Liverpool Football Club from 2010-2012, and Australian cricket team doctor from 2012-2017. Before we start episode 49, the Prepare Like a Pro podcast mission is to empower athletes and aspiring staff with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals to strengthen the AFL community. If you like the show, please show your support by subscribing to our podcast. We're on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. Thanks, Peter. Welcome aboard, mate. You can hear us.
Morning.
Okay?
Yeah. How you going? Yep.
Well.
Yep. Pretty good.
There's a bit of knowledge in the background there behind you.
Oh, it's just for show. Yeah, they're actually empty books just to impress people. That's good.
Well played. I've just got a blank wall. I should have followed suit. I'll note that one down.
Yeah, an old trick.
Well, let's start at the beginning, mate. When did you discover a passion for sports medicine?
Well, I guess sport was always my big thing as a kid. And when I was growing up, I was either, playing sport or watching sport or reading about sport. I don't know why, really, because my parents were quite normal. But I just had this sort of passion for sport. And, I used to race out and get the newspaper and read the sports pages and, back in the day. In fact, I remember thinking when I was a kid that, I'd know when I'd finally grown up is when I started reading the front page of the paper before the back page. But hasn't happened yet. But, maybe it will one day. But anyway. Always loved sport. I actually wanted to be a sports commentator. That was my the real thing I wanted to be when I left school. But my mother decided that wasn't a really acceptable profession, so she convinced me to do medicine. And then I finished up being a boundary line commentator about 30 years later, which was my revenge on my mother. But anyway, I played a lot of sport as a kid. I mean, I wasn't fantastic at anything. I was a reasonable cricketer. Played everything, swimming and tennis, and not a great footballer at school, but turned out to be okay when I left school. So then I went and did medicine at Melbourne Uni. Didn't have a really illustrious academic career, I have to say. I was far more interested in playing footy and running the footy club at Melbourne Uni Blues. So I got very involved there, and I'm still involved there 50 years later. But I scraped through medicine and did all right in the end. And then I still really wasn't sure what I wanted to do medicine-wise. Sports medicine didn't really exist in those days. I mean, it was just starting, I guess, when I finished medicine. The first sort of clinics were starting to open up a few years later. So I went off to England for 3 years, worked over there, mainly watched sport. I'd sort of work for 6 months and then go off and, watch the Olympics or the Euros or something like that, and just watched a whole heap of sport over there. Loved it. Came back. And as I said, sports medicine didn't really exist then, certainly not as a specialty, and there was really no one doing it full time. So I started off in general practice down in McKinnon in Melbourne. And then we, got a bit more involved in sport. People, soon the word gets around, you're interested in sport and so on. So I did a little sports medicine course, and we set up a little sports medicine clinic sort of as a adjunct to our general practice. And then what happened then? Oh, then I basically got my sort of breakthrough in sports medicine, I guess, through my involvement with university footy. I got a call one day from the head of the sports union at Melbourne Uni, inviting me to be the team doctor of the Australian team for the World Student Games, which were being held in Edmonton. This was 1983. And they'd never taken a doctor before, but they decided they wanted to take a doctor. They knew, the fact that I'd been so involved in uni sport and so on got me the gig. And I was really excited. And they said, well, the bad news is you have to pay your own way. And I thought, oh, great. And,
it's a holiday, yeah.
Yeah, it's a holiday. And we just got married and bought a house and, had no money. And I went home and said to my wife, isn't this great? And she said, well, we can't afford to go. And I said, hang on a minute. And I convinced her that was an investment in my career, I think was the term I used. And
well played,
yeah, and that really sort of got me started, I guess. Sometimes you just need a bit of a break, and then once you get your break, then it's up to you then to make the most of it. So did another one 2 years later in Kobe, Japan, then a third one in Zagreb 2 years after that. And then, you meet people on these trips, and so then I got a gig with the Australian swimming team and did that for a while and so on. And then I had an opportunity to tender for a new sports medicine clinic in Melbourne at Olympic Park. So Olympic Park at that stage had sort of dreams, I think, of being the sort of Melbourne AIS, really. They were, going to set up this amazing place with a sports medicine centre and accommodation, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, the accommodation never happened, but the sports medicine centre did. And we got a group of people together and we won that tender. And I was still in general practice at that stage, so I decided, well, I'd give it a crack for 6 months full time in sports medicine. And if it didn't work, then I'd always had my general practice to go back to. And I was delivering babies and doing all sorts of things in general practice. But in fact, I realised I couldn't keep delivering the babies one day, and I started working for Melbourne Football Club at this stage as their team doctor. And I remember I got called for a delivery when I was on the bench at Windy Hill in Essendon, and the delivery was in Moorabbin. I thought, no, I can't do both of these. So that was a defining moment. That was the end of my obstetric career and the start of my sports medicine career. So, so we started the clinic.
What did you do in that situation?
No, I think the baby got born, and not like most things, they do very well even if you're not there. So somebody sorted it out anyway. But more importantly, we won. We beat Essendon that day. Anyway, that's by the way.
Yeah.
So I sort of so pretty much at the same time started this clinic at Olympic Park, which was a multidisciplinary clinic. Doctors, physios, massage, psych, nutrition, pretty much everything. And then got the gig at Melbourne Football Club as their club doctor. And in those days, it was 5 o'clock training on Tuesday night and 5 o'clock on Thursday night, and we played at 2 o'clock on Saturday. It was the old days. The players all worked or studied or something, and they came in after work and started training. And so it was very much like an amateur footy club, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And very different. So I was able to basically work full time and do the footy club.
And is that role? Were you doing very similar? Was your role look very similar at Melbourne Uni? You said you were involved there. Were you involved in the medicine side, or was it more the?
Yeah. Well, both the medicine side, but also I was president of the Uni Blues for a long time and very involved off the field as well. So did a bit of both initially, and then more recently probably more on the medical side, but. So I knew footy and I knew my way around a football club and so on. So so that was a great timing. I'd like to say it's not coincidence, but no one else would agree with me that when I started at Melbourne, I hadn't made the finals for 23 years, and this was 1987, and it was the great Robbie Flowers last season, and there was this big campaign of he'd never played in the finals. He played 15 years, something like that, never played a final. There was this big campaign to, get Robbie into the finals, and the all came down to the last round, and we had to win out at Western Oval, at Brukner AFL, and about 2 other results had to go our way, and it all sort of happened, and then all of a sudden we made the finals, and it was funny. I'd always sort of joked, what happens if we make the finals and Robbie Flower breaks his leg? Well, we came off the ground, and that was the day that Gary Lyon broke his leg, actually, but we came off the ground, and Robbie Flower came up to me and said, Doc. So I took me into the room, and he'd busted his finger. He had quite a nasty fracture in his finger. I thought, you're kidding me, Anyway, we jabbed him up and got him through the next 3 weeks of finals. But that was a pretty amazing year of football. That was the year that Jimmy Steins ran over the mark in the preliminary final, and we lost a couple of points. Very famous final series where we won our first 2 games by about 100 points, and then that day came, and we missed our chance, which was very sad. But silly bloody Irishman. Anyway, it was a great time. People like Jimmy Steins and Gary Lyon were playing, and it was a very exciting time to be involved at Melbourne. And I did 4 years there. We made the finals every year.
Oh, fantastic! Great run.
Made the grand final the next year, and so I was involved in a record-breaking grand final. Unfortunately, it was the record-breaking losing margin, as we got absolutely flogged by a fantastic Hawthorn team, probably the best. I'd argue the best team ever, really. They just smashed us in the grand final. It was one of those grand finals, after 10 minutes you think, oh, God, I just want to go home. Anyway, and then, we should have won a premiership in those 4 years. This was the John Northey era. I really feel, disappointed that we never won a premiership in that time, but we went close, but not quite got there. So that was an exciting time,
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was really how I got started.
Yeah, and so the passion for sport was, like you mentioned, right? As a kid playing and loving sport and being outdoors. But what about the nutrition side of things? Because that's clearly a passion of yours as well.
Yeah, it was funny. I sort of had 2 waves of nutrition interest. Sort of way back then in the 1980s, I worked closely with Karen Inge, who's a very well-known dietitian. Was probably the first AFL or VFL in those days dietitian, I think, with Collingwood and then with Hawthorn. And so Karen and I wrote a book called Food for Sport, which was sort of the first specialist Australian sports nutrition book back in the mid-80s. And then, to be honest, after that, I sort of lost a bit of interest in nutrition because it all became a bit boring. It was all just sort of, Gatorade and Powerade and carb loading and pasta parties and things like that. So I sort of just put that on the back burner, if you like, for a long time until relatively recently, where I've got more interested in not so much sports nutrition, but just general nutrition.
Right, okay. So more from a health focus point of view and longevity. Yep. Yeah, that's my current sort of passion, I guess.
And
do you think there's an overlap there with health and prolonging an athlete's career in there?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing that disturbs me a little bit is that we had a whole generation of athletes who had massive amounts of carbohydrates and sugars, and we encourage that, and that disturbs me a little bit. And the long-term effect of that, we now know, I think that it's not a good thing to have such high doses and so on. So not surprisingly, many of them are now insulin resistant and having issues, with their cardiovascular systems and so on. So hopefully this generation, who are not quite as obsessed about the high levels of carbs, will be much healthier in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it that space that you've seen a significant amount of change over the last sort of 10, 20 years in sport nutrition?
Yeah, look, it hasn't changed that much in sports nutrition, to be honest. There's a bit of a move these days, isn't it, for to try sort of, especially in endurance sport, ultra endurance sport, to try, the ketogenic or low carb, healthy fat, high fat sort of diets. Which I think are much healthier in the general population, but controversial in sport. I think a lot of AFL players now are sort of adopting this sort of train low, compete high philosophy, where they restrict their carbohydrates on non-training days, and then on a heavy training day and match day they'll top up with some carbs. So people are playing around, I think, with the right level of carbohydrates, and which varies from person to person. So I think that's a really interesting area at the moment as to what the best mix is of carbs and fats. It's certainly not as simple as we used to think of, just carbs and more carbs. But so I'm quite interested in that. But as I said, it's more from a general health point of view. I think that we've really been giving people the wrong advice for a long time. We've been so obsessed with fat and cholesterol and so on that we've lost sight of the fact that it's actually sugar and starches and vegetable oils and so on that are the main problem. So
yeah,
I had a sort of a moment myself about 10 years ago, I suppose. I was, in retrospect, sort of metabolically quite unwell. I was obese. I had fatty liver. I was, in retrospect, clearly pre-diabetic. I had a family history of type 2 diabetes. My father had developed it at that same age. And I was not as healthy as I probably thought I was. And I heard a bit about this low-carb, healthy fat diet from Tim Noakes, who's a well-known sports scientist who'd sort of developed type 2 diabetes despite it being incredibly healthy and an athlete who'd run hundreds of marathons and things. But he'd reversed his type 2 diabetes on this low-carb diet, and I thought, wow, I really need to look into this. So I dived into it, looked into it a lot, and the more I do to avoid fat and substitute it with lots of carbohydrates. And I eventually decided I'd give it a crack myself. So I did a 3-month sort of little N=1 experiment. We all know that N=1 is a waste of time, except when the one is you, in which case it becomes very important. And so I did an N=1 experiment and went low carb, stopped eating anything with sugar and any sort of starches and so on, and completely transformed my health. I lost 13 kilograms in 13 weeks. My fatty liver that I'd had for 10 years disappeared. My insulin returned to normal. My triglycerides returned to normal. So basically, I went from being pre-diabetic to being absolutely normal, and I've stayed that way for 10 years since. So, and felt great and had lots more energy and all that sort of stuff. So
that's the key, isn't it, as well? That how sustainable it is. So you kept it off and.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, you feel so good, it motivates you to keep going. It's a bit of an inconvenience, you restrict certain foods and so on. But to be honest, you feel so good that you don't mind doing it, really. And I haven't found it that difficult for the last 10 years. I've kept it going for 10 years now. And so, yeah, I feel good. And so when you I guess when you discover something, not discover, I wasn't the first person to discover it by any means, but, when you come across something like that, you have two choices. You can either sort of keep it to yourself, or I really felt that I had to sort of spread the word and tell people about this program. And so I've really spent the last 10 years largely, I guess, transitioning from my interest in sports medicine to one in of more general nutrition. And we started a charity a few years ago called Sugar by Half to try and sort of campaign to reduce sugar. Wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Fat Lot of Good. And then most recently we've just launched an app called Defeat Diabetes, which is like a carbohydrate restricted approach to managing diabetes. And that's really taken off really well. And it's exciting stuff. So I guess, it's been a bit of a career change for me. I still have an involvement in sport, but my main passion now, I guess, is trying to get people to eat better, because I think, we just, as a country, we're getting fatter and sicker, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. So I'm having a crack.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. It's great work. And for those listening that want to make a bit of a change, like you mentioned, the carbohydrate, sugary foods, what did you substitute in for those foods?
Well, I basically stopped having, any sort of sugar or soft drinks or fruit juice, like fruit juice. We're all told that one of the things that we've been told were healthy, like fruit juice and fruit yogurts and muesli bars and so on, are full of sugar and lots of unhealthy stuff. So I've actually sort of went back probably to eating the way that my grandparents would have eaten, basic healthy food, sort of meat and fish and eggs and dairy. Eggs we've been told, full of cholesterol, you can't have that, and dairy, all that fat, So just went back to basic, eating real food again, and I avoid processed food, try and avoid anything in a packet or a can, and just eat really well. And the other thing is, when you stop eating carbohydrates, you stop being hungry. And so I went from eating, probably 3 meals and 3 snacks a day to eating twice a day, which is what I do now. And virtually never hungry, and it's a much healthier way. And so particularly for people with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, I mean, it's just common sense. I mean, diabetes is a disease of carbohydrate intolerance. Well, my kids would say, duh, you just stop eating carbohydrates. And, it's pretty simple, really. And yet the medical profession has been so obsessed with this fat thing, which is based on a lot of incorrect information, that we lost sight of the fact that we've got to restrict carbohydrates. So that's really the line that we're pushing. And as I said, we've launched this app called Defeat Diabetes. And, we want to try and have an impact on the 2 million people in Australia with type 2 diabetes, and the other 2 million who have pre-diabetes, who, if they don't change things, will develop diabetes. So it's a massive problem in our society. I mean, type 2 diabetes, I think, is the biggest health problem in the country. And yet we're, and we've got a solution. But unfortunately, nobody makes any money out of that solution. So there's not a drug or a surgery. It's just eating properly, and that's not very sexy.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the app, Defeat Diabetes. For those that haven't downloaded it, what does it entail? Is it
it's a whole program. So there's a lot of education there. So it's basically we run through 13 steps where we provide a lot of information. So myself and Paul Mason, who's a sports physician, also a sports physician in Sydney, and Nicole Moore, a dietitian, we spent the whole of last year in lockdown basically developing this content. So we've got 13 steps, each of which have videos, articles, action plans, quizzes, and so on. So you go through that 13. So it gives you all the background information as well as the practical ways of transitioning to a restricted carbohydrate diet. On top of that, we've got meal plans. We've got a whole bunch of really nice recipes. We've got cooking demonstrations because we believe that people don't know how to cook these days. Really simple sort of stuff. So, it costs $2 a week. So it's $99 for the year, and as well as getting all the stuff that's in the app, which is hours and hours of content. You get weekly updates with more videos and articles, and you become part of a Facebook, closed Facebook group where we share ideas and recipes and stories and so on. So
fantastic.
It's very similar. Yeah, similar programs have been remarkably successful in the UK and the US. In the UK, there's a program that had over 400,000 people do their program, and now recognised by the NHS. And both of those programs basically have a 50% remission rate. So 50% of the people who are on the program put their diabetes into remission. The other 50% get off insulin, reduce their medication, reduce weight, and so on. And we've just done a survey of our initial cohort from 3 months ago, and very similar results. They lost an average of 7 kilograms in 3 months. They've all 63% of them, I think, have put their diabetes into remission, and the remaining ones are well on the way to doing so. So it's a very effective program. And if those of you who your audience is probably pretty young and doesn't have type 2 diabetes, but we've all got parents and grandparents and friends who have that. And, we're not making any money out of it. It's just to cover, the money is just to cover. It's incredibly expensive producing an app. I had no idea. But anyway, so we're just trying to get our money back on the fees and so on. But basically I just want to make a difference. And that's really what we're about.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so going back to your career journey along the way, who are your strong influences? Did you have mentors? Like you mentioned, it's changed the sports medicine back then.
Look,
who guided you along the way?
To be honest, I didn't really have a mentor. I sort of, and I guess as a result, I've sort of been very, very keen to mentor other people because, there really wasn't anyone around in my day to sort of had done what I, finished up doing. There was a lovely old guy called Fred Better who was a very eccentric Polish doctor who was in sports medicine and general practice. He was like a bit of a father figure to me. But from a career point of view, the interesting thing is that the thing that I really discovered is that I learned most of my sports medicine from physios. And there's very much, the medical profession attitude is that we know everything, and what would the allied health people know, and but I soon realised, certainly back in those days, and it's still true to a certain extent, in that physios had a much better knowledge of musculoskeletal injuries and conditions than we did, and I was fortunate enough to work with some great physios, really. Very, very lucky, and they taught me so much. People like Trish Ayres and Jane Berman initially, and then Mary Kinch, Kate Crosley, Paul Coburn, all these people who are sort of household names in physio. Also learned a lot from my therapist, Rob Granter, I work with, who's a very well-known person in the myotherapy world. He had a fantastic understanding of this sort of stuff, and so really. I just dived into all sorts of different areas to learn, not just the traditional doctors and orthopedic surgeons and so on. And so I think I had a very multidisciplinary approach to sports medicine, and that's I think the way sports medicine has gone, really looking at the multidisciplinary aspect. And our clinic was truly multidisciplinary. I mean, I think a lot of medicine gives, it's a lip service to being multidisciplinary, but really, the doctors are the big dogs and everyone else is second rate. Well, that wasn't the case in our clinic, and we really worked together and respected each other and learned from each other. So I think that was the big thing for me. I have I have a whole bunch of young doctors who start working at Uni Blues, when they're first year out of medicine or second year out of medicine, and I give them three instructions. I said, okay, you've got to look after the concussion, so you've got to learn everything you know about concussion. You've got to look after the sort of the serious injuries, if there's a significant injury, then or a suturing or anything like that. And then the third instruction is the rest of the time just follow the physios around and listen to everything they say and do, and you'll learn all about sports medicine. And I think that served. We've had a whole bunch of those people go on to become sports physicians and AFL club doctors and so on. There's a number of the current AFL doctors came through Uni Blues. So I think that's been a really good a good way of learning from physios. And we have an osteopath there who I've learned a lot from. We have massage therapists and so on. So we can learn from everyone.
Yeah, it's an amazing message, and it's certainly something that's quite strong in sporting teams. But at Olympic Park, I guess you've adopted that philosophy of working together and having an integrated approach.
Yeah,
that's great, mate. And what about from the athletes that you've worked with amongst Cricket Australia, Liverpool? What are some trends that you've noticed in young athletes that are successful, whether it be the mental side or physical?
Yeah, well, look, I guess there are some common characteristics of all the athletes that you work with. One is that they're resilient, both physically and mentally. So we've seen so many incredibly talented athletes injury. That's just bad luck. Some of it's bad management. I think the really good athletes have incredible attention to detail. They just look at every possible way that they can improve their performance and go about it. So that might be both the mental side and the physical side, whether that be extra training or extra treatment or having a massage or doing a yoga or whatever, different things. So very single-minded about their success. There's not many that haven't worked hard. I can't think of too many athletes who have been super successful who haven't had a great work ethic. And that goes for all of us. Whether it's physios, doctors, whatever. Really, you've got to put in the yards. I guess the other thing is ability to cope with pressure. Particularly at the elite level. There's an enormous amount of pressure on you, and how you cope with that pressure, that expectation. Everything you do is sort of under the eye of thousands of, if not millions of people. And I guess the person I dealt with who handled the pressure better than anyone else was probably Kathy Freeman in Sydney. I don't think anyone's been under as much pressure as her in the history of the Olympic Games, probably, to perform. She was the hometown favourite. She was probably our only genuine gold medal chance in the biggest sport of the Olympics. The whole Olympics have been sort of built up around Kathy. It was all about Freeman night. You couldn't get tickets for Freeman night. Everyone was having barbecues and this, and enormous pressure on her the whole time. And just to ramp it up, in case anyone didn't realise, they got her to light the flame at the opening ceremony, and incredible pressure. And I don't think there are too many people in the world who would have coped with that pressure. And Kathy, she had this amazing ability to sort of switch off. And I think people, misinterpreted it. I don't know, I did initially too, that, she's a bit vague, or she's not really with it some of the time. But that was just her way of coping with the pressure. And then she would sort of draw herself into herself and her inner sort of circle of people, and just shut out the outside world and all the buzz and the crap that was going on about the Olympics. And you might remember the lead up. There was all this stuff about Parekh, the previous gold medal winner, coming and going, and it was just a circus. And through that all, she just managed to cope. And I remember I was actually the manager of the track and field team at that stage. And one of my jobs was to meet the athletes when they finished and sort of usher them through media and, all that sort of stuff. And so I actually sort of spent the 3 or 4 hours after she won with Kathy, which was
amazing experience.
Amazing experience, yeah. But, we went through, through the media and then up to see her family, and then we went up to have the interview with the famous interview with Bruce, and then down to drug testing and so on. And I reckon she said to me 15 times in that 3 or 4 hours. Never once did she say, "I'm so happy." Never once did she say, "Oh, this is the happiest moment of my life. This is fantastic. This is wonderful." Never once. She must have said 15 times. She said, "God, Doc, I'm so relieved. Doc, it's such a relief." Yeah. And I'm sure since then she's had, plenty of time to enjoy it. But at the time, all that, and you remember when she crossed the line, most people sort of, jump up and down and carry on, and Usain Bolt does his, business, and it's a circus. And what did Kathy do? She actually sat down on the track and put her head in her hands. And I remember thinking, I was just near the finish line, thinking, come on, Kathy, come on. It seemed like ages, it was probably 30 seconds, but it seemed like minutes. And I was with Chris Wardlaw, the head coach, and we're saying, come on, Kathy, get moving, Yeah. And I think it was just that overwhelming sense of relief that she had. And so, it was a great privilege for me, obviously. I remember we were sitting down and drug testing, and, and I remember thinking, the country's going crazy because of this little girl next to me. Everyone's, celebrating and so on. And here we are, talking about where we're going to go on our holiday. And it was just, and I simply remember thinking, this is a weird situation, But again, that's what happens when when you work with people. You're incredibly privileged. You have to earn the right to be there, but you are incredibly privileged to get to know people and to be with people at times when, there's amazing things happening. And
absolutely.
Yeah, but she coped with pressure better than anyone I've ever come across.
And is that something that, like how you mentioned, she would switch off, like almost compartmentalize to get herself in the zone? Was that something she practiced, or was that something she just dealt with and adapted along her career?
Yeah, I think she realised that was the only way she could really cope. And she did it so well. And then I'm incredibly proud of her. She's an amazing person and continues to be. Does some great work with the Indigenous communities and so on. And she's a very shy person. She's not someone you never see her around. She's not on. She's probably not on Instagram, or she's not on sort of sought the limelight. In fact, the opposite. She's just sought the quiet life and just a genuinely good person. And I felt very privileged to have been able to spend that time. And in fact, even 4 years earlier in Atlanta, we had a similar, quite a funny experience together. And we caught up a while ago and had a good laugh about it all, and had a bit of a reminisce about things. That, I was very lucky. With that. And you get to work with so many amazing people. And I guess the thing is that you realise that you have these images of people and of these superstars and so on. And what you realise, and in retrospect, it's perfectly obvious, is that they're all just human beings. They've all got the same frailties and insecurities and issues that we all have, and the same challenges. And really, that I guess the trick to dealing with them is to treat them as human beings and not as superstars and so on. And if you get to do that, you're very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good thing for developing, whether it be physios or S&Cs to listen to, isn't it? To deal with the person first rather than the athlete in that sense.
Yeah, because they have plenty of people. Yeah, they have plenty of people who sort of starstruck and want to be friendly with them for all sorts of reasons and so on. But when you're working with someone day to day, it's just a great opportunity to develop that sort of relationship and that friendship, just as a everyday sort of a human being. Because that's what they want. They don't. They've got thousands of fans out there. But a lot of these athletes, they don't really have many true friends and people that they can talk to, that's what, some of the people I work with, whether it be physios or S&C guys and so on, I mean, are just so good at that sort of relationship with the players and so on. And Darren Burgess is a classic example, who, as well as someone I've worked with a lot, and most of your listeners would know who Burjo is, a high performance manager now at Melbourne, formerly with me at the Socceroos and at Liverpool, and since then he's been at Arsenal and Port Adelaide. But he's just got this knack of developing relationships with the people he works with, and they want to work for him. They want to do what he wants them to do, and he'll explain to them why. And but just it's that those people skills that are underrated. We can all have all the knowledge in the world, and it's the same with physios. I mean, you can be the best physio in the world, have the best techniques and so on, but the important thing is your relations. Your relationship and your ability to communicate and to talk to these athletes just on as normal human beings. And I think they appreciate that, and that's what makes it such a good relationship.
Yeah. And do you think that's one of the strong skill sets that you had from early days? Like you mentioned, the academic side wasn't your huge interest, but the being involved in sporting clubs and that side was something you're passionate about. And
look, I think it helps. I think it helps if you can sort of talk sport and so on. But as I said, also you need to be able to talk about other things. Plenty of people want to talk sport to those people, but they might want to talk about their relationship or their little baby or their the house they're buying or something. I mean, I remember I've been giving house buying advice, all sorts of things to different people along the way. God knows I wasn't very qualified for it, but they do, and it is funny because people, I think a lot of the athletes sort of respect you as as someone, whether you're a doctor or some sort of health professional. You do get that level of respect, and people look to you for advice, and so you can be very influential with these people. I mean, the cricketers used to come up to me all the time and ask me questions about. They assume that you know everything. I'd always say, I had no idea. They'd watch some. Dave Warner was the classic. He'd watch some National Geographic video, and he'd breakfast the next morning. He'd say, "Now, Doc, what about this?" Assume that I knew everything, but it is nice to have those sort of relationships.
Absolutely. And what do you see changing in the future in terms of sports medicine? What do you think is in store for the future sports medicine, docs, physios, the whole side?
Yeah. Well, I think there are, from a medical point of view, I think both in sports medicine and medicine generally, I think we're moving away from the model of medicine where it's all very much, medications and surgery and so on. And I think this has happened in physio as well. And the importance of exercise, I think, has really sort of changed. I mean, we've gone in the time I've been in sports medicine, and interestingly, even the term sports physician, we're now called a sport and exercise medicine physician. So that's changed over the period of time, and that really reflects the changes in sports medicine, I think, to become very much focused on things like medicine and nutrition and so on, and rather than just treating injuries with medications or surgery. And I think that's a general sort of thing in medicine. I'd like to think it's heading that way. I think there's always challenges in sports medicine and sports science, and it's getting the mix right between the science and the sort of I guess human element to it all.
The art of it.
And the science and art, and medicine is both a science and an art, and sports medicine in particular, I think. So, I think that's always a challenge. The science is important. We've got to keep doing the science. We've got to keep showing what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But as you and your listeners would know, it's very hard to do good science in elite sport. I mean, you can't do randomized controlled trials at professional sporting teams, as much as we'd love to. And so the problem is that all the research, all the science is done on non-elite sport. And can you then extrapolate that to elite sport? Sometimes yes, sometimes they're different animals, and it's not that relevant. So there's a lot of challenges out there. But it's an exciting time, and it's a great career. I mean, I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to combine my passion and my career. I mean, not many people get to do that, and, I can honestly say I've woken up every morning of my working life and looking forward to go to work, well, again, if you can get to my age and say that, you're incredibly lucky. And, I guess my timing was good, in that, I sort of finished medicine and started my medical career just as sort of sports medicine was emerging. So I could be part of that sort of initial wave of people, if you like. We all sort of worked together to get sports medicine recognised as a specialty through the college and so on. So that was an exciting time. And there are probably opportunities that our generation had that are more difficult in the future. But, I always used to say, I was just really lucky with my timing. But as, my family pointed out to me, but I also worked pretty hard. And, I would, it's, and, every night, I mean, I've never watched a TV show in my life, I don't think, other than sport. After dinner at night, I would just go and work for 2 or 3 hours. I'd be reading something or writing or doing something work-wise. And I guess, I probably didn't have the work-life balance as good as I could, but, it's you've got to have that passion. And, I said before I wasn't really academic when I was a medical student, and I'm not a natural academic, but I became, sort of academic because I was interested in things and passionate about things. And if you're really interested, you see a patient that day with, Achilles tendon problems. So you want to go home at night and read about Achilles tendon and things like that, which I never did when I was a, medical student, when you sort of had to do it for an exam or something. So, you're doing things because you're interested and so on. And my wife always says if she knew I was going to become a workaholic, she'd never have married me. But anyway, she knew me when I was a pretty lazy medical student. But anyway, we survived. But you do when you're passionate about something, you're interested in something, then learning and working is not a chore. It's something that's you can't wait to get home and read stuff and look up stuff and so on. So it's the way my career's gone.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of that's like a great takeaway, isn't it? For just to better your craft in whatever you do, is it's quite deliberate. Like if there's an area there that you get a question asked by like a Dave Warner on a topic that you're not familiar with, being humble enough to say, look, I don't know, but he probably backs you in to find out the answer in that sense, and that builds that good relationship with your athletes. And
I think
is that how you've always sort of gone about developing yourself?
I think so. Yeah, try and find out more and so on. I think the other thing, Jack, is being prepared to go out of your comfort zone a bit. It's very easy to. I remember thinking, when I was at Melbourne, way back in the 80s, and I was relatively young at the time, I could have, stayed in that job, and done VFL as was then and so on. But, I wanted to explore opportunities. I then went and did the Australian athletics team job for, 10 years and did some Olympics and things like that. And then I did that and then took some time out when the kids were, were teenagers and so on. And then I went back and did the Socceroos for 4 years leading up to the 2010 World Cup. And then I got this offer from Liverpool. It came out of the blue, really. I got approached to Liverpool was setting up they were changing their medical system. They were revamping it. Yeah, so they'd say they created this position called Head of Sports Medicine and Sports Science, which had never sort of existed before at a Premier League club and so on. And I was approached, and initially, to be honest, I sort of said no. Look, it didn't really suit family-wise. Our youngest son was still at school another year or two, and we'd always sort of talked about maybe going back to England and doing a Premier League job, when the kids had grown up, but it just came, sort of 18 months too early or 2 years too early. And so initially I said no, but they're very persistent. And I guess eventually, I sort of thought, well, I could stay in my comfort zone, but this is a massive challenge, taking on a new job in a very, traditional environment like the Premier League, leaving my family. They came over holidays and things, but that was that wasn't easy. And basically living by myself in Liverpool for that time. So, but I thought, look, this is an amazing opportunity and an enormous challenge. And so I sort of got out of my comfort zone and went for it. And it was a fantastic experience. I was able to get a couple of my Socceroos colleagues and Darren Burgess and Phil Coles to come with me, and I wasn't totally on my own. And it was a great challenge there. So I think sometimes you've just got to go out of your comfort zone a little bit and challenge yourself, and it's that way it's how you progress in your career, I guess.
Absolutely. And so that role that had the sports medicine title makes sense, but the fact that it had the science component to it as well, is that a GPS?
Yeah.
Like, what was the sports science component to that role, and what would that look like on a daily basis for you?
Yeah, well, again, it was really something that Burjo ran. I just oversaw the whole program, and basically I got him in because I'd worked with him at the Socceroos, and we had a good relationship, and I also admired what he did. And look, to be honest, at the time, this is 2010. The Premier League was way behind the AFL in what they were doing, and things, as you said, things like GPS, just in monitoring in general, they just didn't do it. And
is that why you were approached?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think there was part of.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, both in medicine and sports science. Yeah, I think there was a feeling out there that, because apparently they looked for someone in England to do this role and couldn't find anyone. So, and in fact, the two people who were shortlisted were actually both Australians. So, interestingly enough. So, so I think that there were a few English sports scientists at the time at Man United and a couple of other places who were starting, Chelsea, who were starting to sort of ramp things up a little bit. But certainly overall, the Premier League at that stage was not very strong in science. And I think partly because the managers were not very sort of science oriented. They were mainly traditional English football managers who'd grown up and did things their way, the way when they played, and that's the way we'll do it now, and things hadn't changed. And it took a bit of an influx of some of the foreign managers, the European managers, to come in, I think, to help drive this sort of a push towards sports science. That has certainly helped. And I think now, I think the Premier League is right up there with everyone now. I think in that 10-year period, they've shot ahead in leaps and bounds. And I think Darren's influence, was quite significant in that. And as I said, there were Tony Strudwick at Man United and a few others who were very good as well. And now it's a good standard all round. So that was really interesting. That initially we were told when we got there that oh no, you can't do that. No, the players won't do that. No, you can't. So we did this injury prevention session in that a big sort of indoor football area, and we would do these before training every day. We do these injury prevention sessions. You rotate around. 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Do a bit of proprioception, a bit of et cetera, et cetera. And I remember Joe Cole, who was a England player who just joined Liverpool from Chelsea, and we were standing there watching. He must have been injured or something, and we were standing there watching the prevention session. He said to me, "Doc, you can never do this at Chelsea." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh no, players wouldn't let you. The players were so powerful that they controlled things. If they didn't like something, then it didn't happen." And which was a real shock coming from an AFL and even the Socceroos background. You did what you were told, and hopefully it was explained to you. But even if it wasn't, you just did it because that's what you did. But totally different culture. And people said to us, "Oh, you'll never get the Liverpool players who are big stars and so on to." But they all bought into it, and to their credit, and to Darren's credit, that he got them to buy in, and that's an art in itself, for getting people to buy into your program. And as you would know, and anyone in the AFL industry, for instance, would know. And I remember when Darren went back to Port Adelaide after his Liverpool sojourn. He rang me at one stage. He said, "Oh, look, it's so nice. People don't question you. You tell them to do something, and they don't. You get ready for all the complaints and the questions and so on. And they just do it. So we've got a good culture like that. But, to the players' credit at Liverpool and to Darren's credit, they did adopt that. So, yeah, it was a really interesting time and very different and challenges and so on. But, experience that I'll never forget and never regret, certainly.
Absolutely. And so is there now more English sports scientists, or what we've known as sports science? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think it's good nowadays. And England's always been. I mean, UK's always had really good sports science, schools, Loughborough and John Moores at Liverpool and so on. There's some great sports science universities and so on. They just hadn't really been accepted by the football community. And when we arrived at Liverpool, here was the Liverpool Football Club, and literally down the road is John Moores University, which is arguably one of the top sports science, and there was no link, so we created a link between the university and the football club, which still exists and which has been beneficial for both sides. So things like that just hadn't happened, and there's been a huge flurry of activity in the last 10 years, and as I said, I think they're fine these days. But it was interesting to walk into that from having come from Socceroos, AFL, etc. Where that culture was already ingrained, and so it was a challenge to bring it into English football, and Darren and his colleagues, I think, did a great job of doing that.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, we'll start to wrap you up. I know we've got to don't want to take too much of your time, but it's been amazing sharing your experiences and these stories as well. It's fascinating to listen to all the things you've experienced over your journey. What are you excited about for 2021? What's on the horizon for you, Peter?
Well, I'm involved with 3 sporting teams this year, and I'm hopeful that at least one, if not more, will do well. So I have a role at Melbourne Football Club. Darren sort of got me involved there. I think he figured that. I took him 20,000 kilometres to Liverpool. He could take me 20 kilometres to Melbourne, so I couldn't really argue with that. So I'm doing a little bit of work there, just a day a week there, and that's been terrific. They've got a fantastic medical fitness sort of group there. That's a real pleasure to work with. So that's good, and I have still my Uni Blues involvement, which is my my real passion. It's my 50th season at Uni Blues, and we're the defending 50th. Yeah.
Amazing.
I know it's sad, isn't it? My kids keep saying, "When am I going to leave university?" But I say, "No, probably never." But an amazing club. Like many, I'm not saying that they're anything different from anyone else, but they're an amazing, community sport is what I love. I think that's actually my favourite level of sport, sort of what I'd say high level amateur sport. So, A-grade amateur footy.
VAFA,
I'm also involved with it. Yeah, VAFA. It's a great competition, and they're a great bunch of guys. And, I love heading down there. I'm down there every Tuesday and Thursday night and Saturdays, and I love it. It's not a chore at all. It's a pleasure. And, we won the last flag, which was 2019, and you never know. We always hope to do it again. And then I'm also involved with the Premier League hockey team. My kids finished up playing hockey for a whole bunch of different reasons, so I still help sort of coach and organise one of the Premier League hockey clubs are also doing well. So this is a frustrating thing. We're in lockdown at the moment, and I've had a weekend where I didn't have any community sport. I was just able to watch the Melbourne game, but. I really miss that involvement in community sport, and just being part of a community. I think communities are so important, especially for young people to be part of a community, and sporting clubs are to the forefront there. And we need to get back to playing community sport as soon as we possibly can, and I'm hoping that'll be the next week or two. So that'll be great. So that's what I really enjoy. My other passion, as we talked about before, is getting people to eat better and trying to knock this diabetes thing on the head. So my Defeat Diabetes app and the campaign is the other sort of passion I have in life. So between all of that and a few other little bits and pieces along the way, I keep pretty busy, and I'm still loving what I do. I still enjoy everything that I do, and hopefully I'm of some use to some of these organisations as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's been inspiring to hear the energy in your voice all throughout the last sort of 45 minutes sharing your stories, mate. Thank you so much for jumping on.
My pleasure, Jack. It was really enjoyed chatting.
Hopefully people got their notebooks out and wrote down all your gems. There's been plenty
I'm
there.
not sure about that.
I've quickly written down some notes, so I'll make sure I share mine. But yeah, thank you very much, Peter, for jumping on, and look forward to catching up in the flesh at some time in the future.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Peter. Well, thank you for listening, guys. And make sure if you enjoyed the show to subscribe to our channel. You can also subscribe to our website, preparelikeapro.com, where you'll get lots of free content, including a 4-week strength and conditioning program. And this IGTV, for those that tuned in a little bit late, will be sitting on Instagram, so you can tune back and listen to Peter from the very beginning. Thanks again for listening in, and till next time. Cheers, guys.